I came home 2 days early from my business trip. As I drove closer to my house, my neighbor suddenly ran into the street and waved me down. He looked shaken and whispered, "Listen, don't go inside yet. Wait until midnight. You need to see with your own eyes what's happening in your house." His words left me frozen behind the wheel. After 35 years as a firefighter, I had learned to trust my instincts when something felt wrong. I waited as he asked. And when midnight finally arrived, "I want to know where in the world you're watching this. Leave your city or country in the comments, it means more than you know. Subscribe to Revenge Dad and stay with me for what comes next." Please note, this story includes fictional elements added for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to actual names or places is coincidental, but the message I'm sharing with you is one worth holding on to. The drive back from Sacramento should have taken 4 hours. I made it in 3.5, and I still couldn't tell you exactly why I pushed so hard to get home 2 days early. I told myself it was the weather. The forecast called for rain along the I-5 corridor by Thursday, and my truck's rear tires had been pulling slightly to the left since August. That was the practical reason, the one I repeated to myself somewhere around the Stockton interchange when I passed the last rest stop without slowing down. But the truth was simpler and harder to explain. Something felt wrong, not dramatically wrong, not the kind of wrong that comes with sirens and smoke and a dispatcher's voice cutting through static. In 35 years as a firefighter, the last 12 as captain of Pasadena Station 4, I had learned to trust the quieter signals, the slight drop in air pressure before a flashover, the particular stillness of a building that was about to give way, the feeling that arrived before the evidence did. That feeling had been sitting in my chest since Monday morning, when I kissed my duffel bag into the truck bed and backed out of the driveway on Rosevilla Street. My name is Walter Bennett. I am 65 years old. I am a retired fire captain, a widower of 2 years, and the father of one son named Jason, who is 38 years old, and currently living in my house because his life fell apart, and I told him he didn't have to face that alone. I was beginning to wonder if I had made a mistake. The exit for Pasadena came up at 4:47 in the afternoon. The sun was sitting low and golden over the San Gabriel Mountains, throwing long shadows across the dry grass on the hillsides. It was the kind of light that made everything look peaceful, preserved, like a photograph of something that no longer existed. I turned onto Rosevilla Street and immediately pressed the brake. Harold Dexter was standing in the middle of the road, not on the sidewalk, not at the edge of the curb, in the middle of the road, with both arms raised at shoulder height, palms facing me, the way a traffic officer signals a full stop. He was 72 years old, barrel-chested with white hair cut close to his skull, and the kind of permanently narrowed eyes that came from spending 3 decades looking for things people tried to hide. Harold had been my neighbor for 20 years. He had been a claims investigator for Los Angeles County before he retired. He was not a man who stood in the middle of roads for no reason. I rolled down the window. "Harold!" My voice came out steady. "What's going on?" He walked to my door, bent slightly at the waist, and looked at me with an expression I had not seen on his face before. Not fear exactly. Something more controlled than fear. The look of a man who had already decided what needed to happen and was now executing the plan. "Don't go inside," he said. "Not yet." My hand tightened on the steering wheel until I felt the leather creak under my palm. "What do you mean, don't go inside? That's my house." "I know it is." Harold glanced toward my driveway, then back at me. "There are things you need to understand before you walk through that door, Walter. Things I should have told you sooner. I'm telling you now." My chest tightened like someone had reached in and closed a fist around my sternum. "Is Jason hurt?" "No." Harold shook his head firmly. "He's not hurt. But there are people involved in his life right now that you don't know about. And what they're doing inside your house, they don't want anyone to see." I stared at him for a long moment. The engine idled. Down the street I could see the front of my house, a 4-bedroom Craftsman that my wife Eleanor and I had bought 23 years ago, when Jason was 15, and the neighborhood still had 2 empty lots and a corner store that sold ice cream sandwiches in the summer. The front lights were off. The curtains in the living room were drawn completely shut. They were never shut. Eleanor had always insisted on natural light. "Tell me exactly what you've seen," I said. Harold straightened up. "Not out here. Pull up the block and park. Come to my car." He was already turning back toward his driveway. "And Walter, wait until midnight. Whatever you're thinking about doing right now, wait." I almost didn't. 35 years of running toward emergencies had burned the instinct so deep into my body That waiting felt physically wrong, like holding your breath underwater while something burned above the surface. But Harold Dexter had spent 30 years catching people who thought they had covered their tracks perfectly. If he was telling me to wait, there was a reason. I pulled the truck up 3 blocks and parked behind a gardener's trailer. I sat there for a moment with my hands on my knees, watching a mockingbird land on the telephone wire above me, and then take off again without making a sound. Then I got out and walked back to Harold's car. He was already in the driver's seat, a spiral-bound notebook open across his lap. The handwriting inside was small and precise, each entry dated and timed in the top left corner. I could see the entries went back at least 3 weeks. "How long have you been watching?" I asked as I settled into the passenger seat. Harold tapped the first page. 22 days, he said. "Since the 2nd week of August. That's when I first noticed the cars." My throat tightened. "What cars?" "Dark-colored vehicles, always after 10 at night, always at least 2, sometimes 4. Harold turned to the first entry and angled the notebook toward me. Dates, times, partial plate numbers, and brief physical descriptions of the people he had observed. The handwriting of a man who had testified in court and knew exactly what documentation looked like. "They pull the curtains before anyone gets out of the vehicles. They kill the exterior lights. And they don't leave until after 2 in the morning. My heart was hammering now, but I kept my face as still as I could manage. "And Jason lets them in." "Every time." Harold's jaw tightened. "There's a man who arrives first and leaves last. 50's always in dark clothing, leather bag. He walks through your front door like it belongs to him." "Do you know who he is?" Harold reached into the back seat and picked up his laptop. He opened it, typed something, and turned the screen toward me. The website was clean and professional. A circular logo in muted gray and copper. A tagline that read, "Reconnect with the self you were always meant to be." Beneath the logo, 2 words that meant nothing to me, and somehow made my stomach drop anyway. "The Ash Circle." "I found the name on a document," Harold said. "Someone left it on your front step 3 days ago. I photographed it at first light, then left it exactly where it was, so they wouldn't know it had been seen." He pulled a folded printout from the notebook. "Walter, whatever this group is, they know your address, and they're treating your house like it already belongs to them." I looked at the words on the screen. I looked at the notebook in Harold's lap, 22 days of careful, meticulous documentation, written by a man who had once tracked a fraudulent claim across 6 counties without making a single error. The sun finished dropping behind the mountains. The street went gray and cool around us. "How long until midnight?" I asked. Harold checked his watch. 6 hours and 11 minutes. I leaned back in the seat, pressed my palms flat against my thighs to stop them from shaking, and said, "The only thing left to say." "Then start from the beginning. Tell me everything you saw." Harold didn't rush. That was the first thing I noticed about the way he told it. He turned to the opening page of his notebook, smoothed the edge flat with his thumb, and began the way a man begins when he knows the details matter more than the speed. "August 6th, he said, 10:14 at night. I was up late reading when I saw headlights come slow down the street and stop in front of your house. Not pull into the driveway. Stop at the curb. Engine still running. I kept my eyes on the notebook. My hands were pressed flat against my knees. The curtains in your living room went shut before anyone got out of the vehicle," Harold continued. "Not Jason doing it from inside. I could see his shape moving toward the window, right after the car stopped. He was watching for it. He knew they were coming. That detail landed somewhere in the center of my chest and didn't move. Jason knew. He had been expecting them." "How many people?" I asked. "That first night, 4. 2 men, 2 women. They were inside by 10:20 and gone by 1:45 in the morning." Harold turned to the next page. "Second visit, August 9th. 6 people. The man I described to you, the one who arrives first, that was the first time I saw him." "Tell me more about him." Harold's eyes narrowed slightly, pulling from memory, the way investigators do when they've trained themselves to store visual information, like files in a cabinet. 50 maybe, 52. Average height, lean build. Always in dark clothing, not casual, more like business dress without the tie. He carries a leather bag, the kind with buckle straps, dark brown. He walks to your front door, and Jason opens it before he can knock. Every time. My throat tightened. Every time. "He moves through your house like the floor plan is already familiar to him," Harold said. "Not looking around, not pausing. He knows where the living room is. He knows where the hallway leads. He sat down in the armchair by the window. Your armchair, Walter, the one facing the fireplace, and he put his bag on your coffee table. I felt a slow burn move up from my stomach into my chest. That armchair had been in our living room for 19 years. Eleanor had reupholstered it herself the summer Jason turned 16, choosing a dark blue fabric because she said it matched the color of the mountains in winter. I had never let anyone sit in it except family. And Jason just let him. My voice came out rougher than I intended. Jason handed him a glass of water and sat on the couch across from him. Harold's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Like a student sitting across from a teacher, the burn in my chest spread wider. Harold flipped forward several pages. Over the following 2 weeks, the visits became more frequent. Every 2 to 3 nights, the number of people grew. By August 21st, I counted 11 individuals entering your house in a single evening. He paused, then added, "The second to last night before you came home, I heard something I hadn't heard before." "What did you hear?" Harold looked at me steadily. Voices, rhythmic, like a group reading something aloud together, all at the same pace. It came through your front window around midnight. I couldn't make out the words, but the cadence was unmistakable. Uniform, coordinated. He tapped the notebook. "I've heard that pattern before. 30 years ago, working a fraud case out of Burbank. A group that called itself a personal development community. Turned out they were running a full financial exploitation operation. Took everything from 11 families before anyone figured out what was happening. The mockingbird I had seen earlier landed on Harold's side mirror, looked at us once with its black eye, and flew away. The street was going dark around us, the last orange light fading off the tops of the liquid amber trees that lined the block. "You said someone left a document on my front step," I said. Harold closed the notebook and reached into the back seat again. He brought out his phone, this time opened the photo gallery, and handed it to me. The image showed a single sheet of paper, lying on my front porch, partially overlapping the doormat. Eleanor had chosen the one with the small painted birds along the border. The document had a letterhead at the top, a circular logo in gray and copper, and beneath it the words, "New Horizons Center, Old Pasadena, California." Below the letterhead in clean printed text, Rose Villa Property. Phase 2. Assessment. Preliminary site evaluation for community sanctuary designation. Priority status confirmed. My community sanctuary. My house. Assessed, designated, and confirmed as a priority, without my knowledge, without my consent, without so much as a knock on my door. "I photographed it at 6:43 in the morning," Harold said. "Someone came back for it at 7:20. I watched from the upstairs window. It was a young woman, mid-20s, dark hair. She picked it up, folded it, and put it in her jacket pocket without slowing down." I handed his phone back. My hand was steadier than I expected it to be, which was the only good thing I could say about the moment. "Harold." I turned to look at him directly. "Why didn't you call me the first week?" He held my gaze without flinching, but something moved behind his eyes that I recognized after a moment as something close to guilt. "Because I told myself I might be wrong," he said. "Because Jason is your son, and I didn't want to be the man who called you back from a trip to tell you something I couldn't yet prove." He set the notebook on the dashboard. "And because the last time I moved on incomplete information, I cost a family 2 years of legal grief before the truth caught up." He exhaled through his nose, a slow, controlled sound. "I wanted to be certain before I put this in your hands." I nodded. I understood that. I had made the same calculation 100 times in burning buildings, the difference between acting too soon and acting too late and the weight that lived in the space between. "You said wait until midnight," I said. "What happens at midnight?" Harold looked toward my house at the end of the block. The curtains were still drawn. A single lamp burned behind the left front window, throwing a dim wedge of amber light onto the porch. "The last 3 visits they started the main gathering at midnight, exactly," he said. "Not 11:50, not 12:10, midnight. Whatever they do in there, they're precise about when it begins." He picked up his phone and pulled up a second photograph. "And 2 nights ago, I found this slipped under my windshield wiper when I came out to get the morning paper." I took the phone. It was a photograph of a single handwritten line on a plain white card. "Good neighbors know when to look the other way." My heart rate kicked up hard and fast the way it did in the first seconds after an alarm. Not panic, something older and colder than panic. The recognition that something real was happening, that it had been happening for weeks while I was 400 miles away, telling myself the pull in my rear tires was reason enough to come home early. "They know you've been watching," I said. "They suspect it." Harold took his phone back. There's a difference, and right now, that difference is the only advantage we have. He checked his watch and showed me the face. 6 hours and 4 minutes until midnight. So, do you want to keep talking, or do you want to sit here and let that advantage run out? I straightened in the seat. Outside, the last of the daylight disappeared behind the mountains, and Rose Villa Street went fully dark. Keep talking, I said. The 6 hours passed, the way long hours always pass when there is nothing to do but wait and everything to lose if you move too soon. Harold made coffee at 8 o'clock. Instant from a jar he kept in his glove compartment, mixed with bottled water. He heated on a small camp burner he pulled from his back seat, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't ask why he kept a camp burner in his car. After 30 years of claims investigation, Harold Dexter was a man who had learned to be prepared for the specific possibility that he might need to wait a very long time for the truth to show itself. We talked some. Not about Jason, not about the group. Harold told me about a case he had worked in 1987, a warehouse fire in Azusa that turned out not to be accidental. I told him about the Kinaloa Mesa fire of 2002, the one that took out 63 homes in 4 hours and left our crew working the perimeter for 11 straight days. We talked the way men talk when they are trying to keep their hands steady by keeping their mouths moving. At 11:15, Harold put the camp burner away and picked up his binoculars. At 11:40, the last light in the upstairs window of my house went dark. At 11:58, I saw the first car turn onto Rose Villa Street without its headlights on. "Here we go," Harold said quietly. He handed me the binoculars without being asked. His fingers were steady. Mine were not. I felt the tremor in my right hand as I raised the lenses and tried to focus, and I pressed my elbow hard against the car door to brace myself the same way I used to brace against a hose line in high wind. The vehicle, a dark-colored SUV, stopped at the curb in front of my house. The doors opened. 4 people got out, moving quickly and quietly, heads slightly down, the particular body language of people who had practiced not being noticed. A second car arrived 30 seconds later, then a third. My front door opened before any of them reached the porch. Jason stood in the doorway, backlit by the dim amber glow from inside. He raised one hand in a brief gesture. Not a wave, something more controlled, more deliberate. The kind of signal that meant everything was clear. Come in now. One by one, the figures moved up my porch steps and through my front door. The last one to arrive came alone. He parked a full block away and walked. Dark clothing, leather bag with buckle straps, the unhurried stride of a man who believed the sidewalk existed for his convenience. He paused once at the edge of my driveway, turned his head slowly in both directions, and scanned the street with the patient, methodical attention of someone who had done this many times before. "That's him," Harold said, his voice dropping to barely above a breath. "That's the one I told you about." I kept the binoculars on the man's face as he turned. He was in his early 50s with sharp, angular features and close-cropped dark hair that was going gray at the temples. His expression was entirely neutral, not relaxed, not alert, just carefully, deliberately blank. The face of a man who had trained himself out of showing anything he didn't choose to show. He walked to my front door. Jason opened it immediately. The man stepped inside, and Jason closed the door behind them without looking back at the street. 11:59. "Walter?" Harold's voice was tight. "Look at the window." I shifted the binoculars to the living room window. The curtains were drawn, but there was a gap, maybe 2 inches, where the left panel didn't quite reach the right. Through that gap, I could see movement, shapes, people arranging themselves in the room. Then the single lamp in the corner switched off, and the room went dark. A moment later, a different light appeared, smaller, warmer, the specific dancing quality of an open flame. My stomach dropped 6 inches straight down. "They've lit something," I said. "Candles," Harold said. Same as the last 3 times. Through the 2-inch gap in my curtains in the living room of the house I had owned for 23 years, I watched 12 people arrange themselves into a circle. They stood with their shoulders almost touching, facing inward, and at the center of the circle sat a wide copper bowl on my coffee table. The table Eleanor and I had carried up from a estate sale in Monrovia the summer before Jason started high school. The man with the leather bag stood at the head of the circle. He reached into his bag and withdrew a small stack of paper individual sheets, each one torn to roughly the same size. He moved around the inside of the circle and handed one to each person without speaking. When he was done, he returned to his position and reached into the bag again. This time, he withdrew a box of long fireplace matches. He lit the candle in the copper bowl with a single strike. The flame caught and held, throwing a low amber light upward across the faces of the people standing around it. I could see Jason's face clearly in that light, and what I saw made my breath catch in my throat and lodge there like something solid. He looked peaceful, not happy, not excited. Peaceful in the specific way that people look when they have stopped asking questions, when they have handed the asking over to someone else and told themselves it was a choice. The man at the head of the circle began to speak. I couldn't hear the words through the glass, but I could see the rhythm of his mouth and the way everyone else in the circle responded to it. Small nods, slight adjustments of posture, the collective lean of people orienting themselves toward a single point. Then he gestured toward the sheets of paper. One by one, people uncapped pens and bent their heads and began to write. Harold's hand found my arm in the darkness of the car. His grip was firm and deliberate, the grip of a man delivering information through touch because words would take too long. I knew before he said it. I knew from the way his fingers tightened. "I told you I photographed the instruction sheet they left on your step." He said, his voice so low I had to turn my head to hear it. "I read it before I gave it back. I know what they're writing on those papers, Walter." My throat had closed down to almost nothing. "Tell me." "They call it the Ash Renewal," Harold said. "Every member writes the name of the person they believe is holding them back from their new life, the person they need to let go of." His grip on my arm didn't loosen. "They write the name, then they burn the paper in the bowl, then someone collects the ash and scatters it through the window." He paused for exactly 1 second. "It's a ritual, a structured, deliberate ritual designed to make the act of cutting off a family member feel sacred instead of what it actually is." Inside the living room, the first person stepped forward and held their paper to the candle flame. It caught at the corner, curled, and dropped into the bowl. Then the next person stepped forward. Then the next. Jason was standing on the far side of the circle. His paper was in both hands. His head was bent slightly, and I could see his lips moving. Not speaking aloud, just moving the way a person's lips move when they are reading something they have written and making sure it is exactly right. I had not cried since Eleanor's funeral. I had stood at her graveside in the November rain and felt the grief move through me like a current and held myself upright because I didn't know what would happen if I let go. I had not cried once in the 2 years since. My eyes burned now with a heat I hadn't felt in a very long time. "Harold," I said, and my voice came out fractured in a way I could not entirely control. "Is it possible that name on Jason's paper is not mine?" Harold looked at me. The amber light from my living room window fell across the left side of his face. "Walter," he said carefully, "in 22 days of watching, Jason has not invited a single other person into that house. Not one friend, not one colleague, not one person from his life before this group." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Inside my living room, Jason stepped forward to the copper bowl. He held the paper over the flame. The edge caught. He held it steady, watching it burn, his face open and calm and absolutely certain. I lowered the binoculars. I could not watch the rest. In 35 years of firefighting, I had pulled people out of burning buildings. I had carried strangers over my shoulders through smoke so thick you navigated by memory and instinct alone. I had stood at the edge of structures that were 30 seconds from collapse and made decisions about who could still be reached. I had never once felt as helpless as I felt sitting in Harold Dexter's car on a dark street in Pasadena, watching my son burn my name. I did not sleep that night. Harold offered me his guest room at 1:30 in the morning, after the last car had pulled away from my house, and the living room light had finally gone dark. I told him I was fine. I sat in his armchair by the front window with a glass of water I never drank and watched the street until the sky went from black to deep blue, to the pale washed-out gray of early morning. At 6:45, I walked back to my truck, drove it around the block, and parked in my own driveway like a man returning from a trip, which technically I was. I unlocked my front door with my own key and stepped inside. The house smelled different, not dramatically nothing I could have named to a stranger, but I had lived in these rooms for 23 years, and I knew the way this house smelled, the way I knew the sound of its pipes and the particular creak of the third stair from the top. There was something underneath the familiar smell now, something faintly sweet and smoky, like incense burned hours ago and mostly dissipated, like a church after the congregation has gone home. I walked to the living room and stood in the doorway. The furniture had been moved back into place. The copper bowl was gone. The curtains were open again, and the morning light came through the windows and fell across the hardwood floor in long, pale rectangles, the same way it had fallen across that floor every morning for 2 decades. If I hadn't seen what I'd seen the night before, I would not have known anything had happened here at all. That was almost worse than finding the room destroyed. I heard Jason's footsteps on the stairs at 7:20. He came into the kitchen in a gray sweatshirt and socks, running one hand through his hair, and stopped when he saw me standing at the counter with a mug of coffee. "Dad?" His voice registered surprise, but not the loose, unguarded surprise of someone genuinely caught off guard. It was a half second too controlled. "I thought you were coming back Thursday." "Plans changed," I said. I kept my voice even. "Sit down. I made enough for 2. He sat. I set a mug in front of him and took the chair across the table. Outside the kitchen window, a scrub jay landed on the fence post at the edge of Eleanor's garden, looked around once and flew off. I let the quiet sit for a moment. Then I said, "Tell me about the group you've been spending time with." Jason's hands wrapped around the mug. "What group?" "The one that meets here," I said, "at night." Something moved across his face, not guilt, exactly more like recalibration, the expression of someone rapidly deciding which version of the truth to offer. "They're friends," he said finally. "People I've met through the wellness center. We get together sometimes. It's not a big deal, Dad." "They were here until 2 in the morning, Jason." His jaw tightened. "We lost track of time. All 12 of you." I kept my eyes on his face. "Lost track of time, in the dark, with candles." The color shifted slightly in his neck, not a blush, more like a flush of something that wasn't quite anger and wasn't quite shame. He set the mug down. "You were watching us?" "I was watching my house," I said. "There's a difference." He pushed back from the table and stood up, and I could see the tension running through his shoulders, the particular set of a person who has been challenged on something they have decided not to be challenged on. "The people in that group have helped me more in the last 4 months than anything else has in 2 years, he said, and his voice had taken on a quality I didn't recognize, rehearsed almost, like a sentence that had been said aloud many times in other rooms. "I know you don't understand that, but I need you to respect it." "I'm not asking you to stop," I said carefully. "I'm asking you to help me understand. That's different." I leaned forward slightly. "Who is the man who comes first and leaves last?" "The one with the leather bag." Jason's eyes went very still. "His name is Victor. He founded the center." "Victor what?" A pause, one beat too long. "Hale," he said. "Victor Hale." Before I could respond, 3 sharp knocks landed on the front door. Jason's posture changed instantly. The tension in his shoulders released in a way that told me he had been expecting this, that some part of this morning had already been planned before I walked through my own front door. He moved to answer it before I could stand. Victor Hale stepped into my house for what I now understood was far from the first time. He was exactly as Harold had described, lean, sharp-featured dark clothing, the leather bag hanging from one shoulder. Up close, his eyes were a pale, clear gray, and they moved to me immediately with an expression of such practiced warmth that my stomach turned over hard. He crossed the room in 4 strides and extended his hand. "Mr. Bennett," he said. His voice was low and unhurried, the voice of a man who had never once felt the need to fill a silence he didn't choose to fill. "I've heard so much about you. It's genuinely good to finally meet." I shook his hand. His grip was firm and perfectly calibrated, not aggressive, not weak. Exactly as much pressure as required to communicate confidence without threat. "I wish I could say the same," I said. The corner of his mouth moved, not quite a smile, just an acknowledgement that he had registered the response and filed it away. He settled into the chair across from me, like he had sat in it 100 times. Behind him, Jason stood in the kitchen doorway, with his arms crossed and his eyes on the floor, and I recognized the posture immediately. I had seen it in firehouses and debriefs after bad calls on the faces of young crew members who had made a decision they weren't sure about, and were waiting to see if someone with more authority was going to validate it or take it apart. It was the posture of a man waiting for permission he wasn't sure he deserved. Victor Hale sat in the chair across from me, the way a man sits when he has decided the room belongs to him and is simply waiting for everyone else to reach the same conclusion. He set his leather bag on the floor beside his chair, not on my coffee table. This time I noticed, which told me he was paying attention and adjusting. He folded his hands in his lap, crossed one ankle over the opposite knee, and looked at me with those pale gray eyes that were warm in a way that made the back of my neck prickle. Jason tells me you spent 35 years with the Pasadena Fire Department, he said. Captain toward the end. That's an extraordinary commitment to other people's safety. It was a job, I said. He smiled at that, a slow, appreciative smile, as if I had said something unexpectedly insightful. That kind of modesty is rare. Most people in positions of authority need the title more than the work. He tilted his head slightly. Jason has a great deal of respect for you. I want you to know that. I looked at Jason, who was still standing in the kitchen doorway. His arms were uncrossed now, hanging loose at his sides. His eyes were moving between me and Victor with the careful attention of someone monitoring a situation they had hoped would go differently. Then let's talk about the work, I said, turning back to Victor. What exactly does your organization do? We create space, Victor said without hesitating. Psychological and emotional space for people who have been carrying weight that was never theirs to carry. People who have spent years accommodating everyone around them and lost track of their own needs in the process. He glanced toward Jason with an expression of such practiced tenderness that my jaw tightened. Your son came to us during one of the most painful periods of his life. We simply offered him a place to breathe, a place that meets at midnight, I said. With the curtains drawn, Victor's expression didn't flicker. Some of our members work irregular hours. Others simply find that the evening hours allow for deeper focus. There's nothing unusual about that. He spread his hands slightly in open gesture. I understand that from the outside, anything unfamiliar can appear concerning. That's a natural response. I'm not concerned about the hours, I said. I'm concerned about the practices. I leaned forward slightly. What is the ash renewal? For the first time, something shifted in Victor's eyes. Not alarm, something subtler. A brief internal recalibration, the same kind I had seen in Jason's face that morning. Then the warmth came back smooth and immediate, like a surface that had been disturbed and quickly settled. It's a releasing practice, he said. Members identify beliefs, relationships, or patterns that are preventing their growth. They externalize those things, symbolically write them down, release them. It's a well-documented therapeutic technique. You're a therapist, I asked. I'm a facilitator, he said. With extensive training in... What kind of training? I said. Where, what institution? He smiled again, but this one was slightly different, smaller, more careful. My background is interdisciplinary. I've studied with teachers across several traditions. Certification, in my experience, often reflects institutional gatekeeping more than genuine competence, which meant no degree, no license, no credential that any regulatory body in the state of California would recognize. I looked at him for a long moment. He looked back at me with the patient, unhurried confidence of a man who had answered versions of this question many times and had never once been required to answer it honestly. I appreciate you coming by, I said. I stood up. The meeting was over. I had decided that. Victor unfolded from the chair, smoothly picked up his bag, and extended his hand again. I hope we'll have the chance to talk more, Mr. Bennett. Jason is fortunate to have a father who pays attention. He shook my hand, nodded once to Jason, and walked to the front door. He opened it himself. He didn't wait to be shown out. When the door closed, Jason turned to me with something urgent building in his face. Dad, I know what you're thinking, but not now, I said quietly. Go upstairs, Jason. He opened his mouth, closed it. The urgency in his face shifted into something wounded, and then he turned and went up the stairs without another word, his footsteps heavier than they needed to be. I stood in my own living room and breathed. Then I walked to my study. The desk was undisturbed. The bookshelf was undisturbed. The filing cabinet in the corner was closed and locked exactly as I had left it. I crossed to it, unlocked it, pulled out the bottom drawer. The files inside looked exactly as I had arranged them. The household documents, insurance records, the property deed, financial statements going back 6 years. Everything in its place. Everything exactly as it should be, except for the hair. 3 months ago, before I left for the Sacramento trip, I had taken a single strand of my own hair and laid it across the top edge of the financial files, pressed flat, nearly invisible, against the manila folder beneath it. An old habit from 30 years ago, from a period when I had suspected a colleague of accessing personnel files without authorization and needed to know if my suspicion was correct. The hair was gone. Not disturbed, not displaced to one side, gone entirely, which meant someone had opened this drawer, lifted the files, and either not noticed the hair or not known what it meant. The files themselves looked untouched. The order was preserved. Someone careful had been in here, someone who knew what they were looking for and knew how to look without leaving traces. Almost without leaving traces. My chest tightened until I had to set one hand flat on the desk to keep my balance. The documents hadn't been taken. They had been photographed. I was certain of it, the way I was certain of things I couldn't always explain, the same bone-deep certainty that had made me turn around on the I-5 2 days ago and drive 400 miles back to a house I suddenly didn't recognize. I stood up straight, closed the drawer, locked the cabinet. Then I went to the kitchen, picked up my phone, and dialed a number I hadn't called in 2 years. It rang 3 times. Walter Bennett. The voice on the other end was calm and alert. The voice of a man who answered his phone the same way at 10 in the morning as he did at 2 in the morning, because in his line of work there was rarely a meaningful difference. It's been a long time. What's going on? Sam, I said. I need 20 minutes, and I need you to tell me the truth about something, even if the truth is not what I want to hear. A brief pause. Give me the 20 minutes, Samuel Carter said. Start talking. I told Samuel everything. I stood in my study with the door closed and my back against the filing cabinet and talked for 19 minutes without stopping. I told him about Harold's notebook, about the cars arriving after 10, about the ash renewal and the copper bowl, and Jason standing at the edge of the circle with a piece of paper in both hands. About Victor Hale walking into my house that morning, like the floor plan was already familiar to him. About the hair in the filing drawer that was no longer there. Samuel Carter had been my closest friend for 31 years. We had met at a community fundraiser in 1994, argued about the designated hitter rule for 45 minutes, and somehow ended up talking until midnight about our fathers and our failures and the specific loneliness of men who had spent their lives being competent in emergencies and useless everywhere else. He was a psychologist specializing in coercive control and cult recovery at a clinic affiliated with UCLA. He had testified as an expert witness in 4 separate cases involving manipulative organizations in California. He was the most methodical thinker I had ever known, and he had never once told me something was fine when it wasn't. When I finished, he was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. I counted. Then he said, "Walter, what you're describing is not a wellness group." My hand tightened around the phone. "Define what it is." "It has every structural marker of a coercive control organization," Samuel said, and his voice had shifted into the register he used when he was being precise. Slower, more deliberate each word chosen and placed carefully. Isolation from prior relationships, redefinition of family members as obstacles, ritualized group practices designed to create emotional dependency. A leader with no verifiable credentials who positions himself as uniquely capable of facilitating personal transformation. He paused. The ash renewal specifically, that's not therapeutic technique. That's a severance ritual. It's designed to make Jason feel that cutting contact with you is not a loss but an achievement, a milestone in his development. My chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with my heart and everything to do with the specific grinding ache of understanding something you had been hoping you were wrong about. "How do I get him out?" I asked. "Carefully," Samuel said immediately. "Walter, listen to me. Direct confrontation will not work. If Jason feels attacked or cornered, the psychological response is to move closer to the group, not away from it. These organizations are structured specifically to exploit that response. Every argument you make becomes evidence in Jason's mind that you are exactly what they've told him. You are someone trying to control him and prevent his growth. So I do nothing, you do the opposite of nothing," Samuel said, and I could hear the controlled urgency underneath the calm. "You document everything. You build a record. You find out who else has been affected by this group, and you talk to them. And Walter, check your financial accounts today. Not tomorrow, today." I felt the floor shift slightly under my feet. Why? Because organizations like this one do not stay interested in people's emotional lives, Samuel said. They stay interested in people's financial lives. The emotional manipulation is the mechanism, the money is the point. I was already moving to my desk, pulling up my laptop with one hand, while I kept the phone pressed to my ear with the other. "I'll call you back," I said. "I'm driving up from Los Angeles this weekend," Samuel said. "Don't argue with me about it." "I'm not arguing," I said. I ended the call and opened the bank portal. My personal checking account looked exactly as it should. I moved to savings. Normal. I moved to the joint account, the one Eleanor and I had opened in the spring of 2001, the year we refinanced the house, and decided to keep a separate fund for large expenses and emergencies. Jason had been added as a co-owner 7 years ago, when Eleanor's diagnosis made us both think carefully about what responsible planning looked like. The current balance was $23,412 lower than the last statement I had reviewed. I sat down in my desk chair. I pulled up the transaction history. 6 transfers over the past 6 weeks, each one moving between $3,000 and $5,000 to an external account. The receiving account name listed simply as New Dawn Financial Partners. I had never heard that name in my life. My hands were steady on the keyboard. That steadiness was not calm. It was the specific stillness that arrives when something has moved past the point of shock into the territory of confirmation. I had suspected. Now I knew. I picked up my phone and called Harold. He answered on the first ring. "I was wondering when you'd call," he said. "I need you to come over," I said, "and bring the notebook." Harold arrived at 9:15 with his notebook and a second cup of coffee he had not offered to share, which told me he had been awake for a while already and was running on fumes the same as I was. We sat at the kitchen table, and I showed him the transaction history on my laptop, the 6 transfers the receiving account named the amounts, stacked in a column that added up to a number that made Harold set his coffee down and press 2 fingers against his mouth. "New Dawn Financial Partners," he said. "You recognize it?" "No." He leaned closer to the screen. "But the structure is familiar. Nevada registration, no public-facing information, generic name that could belong to anything from a consulting firm to a real estate holding company." He straightened up. "Someone chose that name specifically because it tells you nothing." We spent the next hour going through everything Harold had documented, cross-referencing dates from his notebook, with the transfer dates from the bank records. The pattern was immediate and unmistakable. Every transfer had occurred within 48 hours of a group gathering at my house. The money moved the day after they met. Every single time. I was still staring at that pattern when the knock came at the front door. Jason had left an hour earlier without telling me where he was going. He had come downstairs, taken his keys from the hook by the door, and walked out without making eye contact, his jaw set in the rigid way of a person who has decided that silence is a form of resistance. I had let him go. Samuel's words were still sitting in the front of my mind. Direct confrontation will not work, and I was holding onto them the way you hold onto a rope in bad visibility. I went to the door. The woman standing on my porch was in her early 40s with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of sleep was going to fix quickly, and the particular posture of someone who had been holding themselves together through sheer determination for a very long time. She was holding a large manila envelope against her chest, with both arms the way you hold something you are afraid of dropping. "Mr. Bennett," she said. Her voice was steadier than her eyes. "My name is Diane Reeves. I live in Arcadia. I know this is completely out of nowhere, and I'm sorry for showing up without calling first." She swallowed. "My daughter is in that group. Her name is Lily. She's 26 years old, and I haven't had a real conversation with her in 14 months. Her chin trembled once hard, and then she locked it back into place with the visible effort of a woman who had cried every available tear and was now operating on something beyond crying. "I've been trying to find other families. I found your address through a community board, posting someone in Arcadia mentioned seeing unusual activity on Rose Villa Street. I took a chance that you might be going through something similar." My throat tightened. I stepped back from the door. "Come inside," I said. Harold looked up from the table when we came into the kitchen. Diane saw the notebook and the laptop, and the transaction record spread across the table, and something in her face shifted relief and grief, arriving at the same moment the expression of a person who has been carrying a weight alone and has just discovered someone else knows what it feels like. She sat down across from Harold and set the envelope on the table. Her hands were shaking slightly as she opened it. "Lily sent me these," she said, "about 16 months ago, before she stopped returning my calls. She said she wanted me to have them in case anything happened." Diane spread several documents across the table, printed pages. Some handwritten notes, what appeared to be an internal schedule of group activities. I didn't understand what I was looking at then. I do now. I pulled the closest document toward me. It was a printed page with the New Horizons Center letterhead at the top, the same circular logo I had seen on Harold's laptop 2 nights ago. Halfway down the page, under a heading that read, Phase 2, Expansion Pasadena District, was a subheading I had to read twice before the words fully registered. Priority Property Assets. And beneath that, in clean printed text, Rose Villa Street Residence, Preliminary Assessment, Complete Community Sanctuary Designation, Approved Pending Member Cooperation. Member Cooperation. Jason was the member, my house was the asset. They targeted your house specifically, Harold said. He had been reading over my shoulder. His voice was flat in the way voices get when the anger behind them is too large to fit into tone. They targeted Jason, I said. And Jason lives in my house. Diane looked at me across the table, and her eyes were bright with the specific brightness of someone who has not slept properly in over a year. Mr. Bennett, I need to tell you something about my daughter that I think you need to hear. She pressed her palms flat on the table, steadying herself. Lily is the one who brought Jason into the group. I know how that sounds, but I need you to understand she didn't do it because she wanted to hurt anyone. She did it because she was lonely and frightened, and the group had convinced her that the only people who truly understood her were inside it. Diane's voice cracked clean down the middle on the last word, and she stopped, pressed her lips together hard, and breathed through her nose until she had herself back. She was trying to bring someone she cared about closer to her. She had no idea she was bringing him into something that was going to... She stopped again. I reached across the table and put my hand over hers for a moment. I understand, I said. She nodded rapid and tight and pulled the envelope toward her again. There's one more thing. She reached inside and withdrew a single printed page folded in thirds. She unfolded it and laid it flat on the table facing me. This was the last thing Lily sent me. 3 weeks after the documents. It came through a friend's phone, not her own number. Her number had already been changed by then. It was a photograph of a text message. Mom, I'm in a place I don't know how to leave. I'm sorry. Don't stop looking for me. Don't stop. The message had been sent at 2:47 in the morning. I looked at the timestamp. I looked at Diane's face. The woman across from me had been sitting with that message for 14 months, reading it in the middle of the night, carrying it to work in the morning, holding it together because the alternative was coming apart completely, and her daughter was still out there somewhere, and coming apart was not something she could afford to do. My chest ached for her in a way that felt like recognition. Mrs. Reeves, I said, I think you should stay for a while. We have a great deal to talk about. Outside, the afternoon sun moved behind a cloud, and the kitchen went gray and cool. Harold opened his notebook to a fresh page and uncapped his pen. We were not done gathering information. We were just beginning. Diane stayed for 3 hours. By the time she left, the kitchen table was covered in documents. Hers, Harold's, mine, and the afternoon had gone completely to evening without any of us noticing. I walked her to the door, and she gripped my hand at the threshold with both of hers, her fingers cold and dry, and said, Thank you for not sending me away. I told her I would call her tomorrow. She nodded and walked to her car without looking back, the way people walk when they are afraid that if they stop moving, they will not be able to start again. Harold was still at the table when I came back. He had reorganized everything into 3 separate piles and was looking at the middle one with the expression he had worn during our drive focus still processing. There's something I haven't shown you yet, he said. He reached into the back of his notebook and withdrew 4 photographs he had printed on regular copy paper, slightly grainy but clear enough. He laid them on the table one by one. The first showed a page of text under the New Horizons Center letterhead. The second showed what appeared to be a hand-drawn floor plan. I leaned closer and felt my stomach contract sharply. It was my house. Not a rough sketch, a careful measured drawing. The living room, the hallway, the study, the kitchen, the dimensions noted in small handwriting along each wall. Someone had walked through every room of my home and committed it to paper with the deliberate attention of a person planning how the space would be used differently. Where did you get this? My voice came out lower than I intended. The floor plan came from a different source, Harold said. 4 nights ago, after the group left, I went back to photograph the front of your house from the street standard documentation. When I got back to my car, I found a document packet on the floor of my passenger seat. I had left the window cracked an inch for ventilation. He paused. Someone had been watching me watch them, and they slipped it through without me hearing it. He set the photographs on the table. I think they wanted me to find it. I think it was a message that they knew I was there and that they weren't concerned. He tapped the floor plan. This was at the back. I straightened up and pressed one hand flat against the table. The floor plan of my house? Eleanor's house, the house we had chosen together, on a Tuesday afternoon in the spring of 2001 because she loved the bay window in the living room, and I loved the size of the backyard drawn by someone who had no right to be inside it, for purposes I had not authorized and had not been asked to authorize. "There's a label," Harold said quietly. He pointed to the bottom right corner of the floor plan. In small printed text, Primary Sanctuary Phase 2. Capacity Assessment, 14 to 18 members. Renovation Timeline, Q1 following transfer. Transfer. The word sat in the middle of my chest like something with weight. "They're not planning to use it while I'm here," I said. "No," Harold said, "they're not." I picked up the third photograph. It showed another page of text internal group communications based on the format. I read the first paragraph and then had to stop and read it again because the first reading didn't fully land. It was a list of action items assigned to specific members. Third item on the list, assigned to a name I recognized immediately. Jason B. Continued Asset Relationship Management. Target timeline for full cooperation, 8 to 12 weeks from current date. Asset Relationship Management. My son assigned to manage me like a property account. Given a timeline, given a target. My hand was trembling now, not much, just enough to feel it, a fine vibration in my fingers that I hadn't experienced since the night of the Kinaloa Mesa fire, when I stood at the perimeter and watched a structure I couldn't enter anymore go down in under 4 minutes. That particular trembling was not fear. It was the physical response to something too large to absorb all at once. I set the photograph down carefully. "Harold," I said, "I need to go into the study." He nodded without asking why. I walked down the hall and into my study and went directly to the filing cabinet. I unlocked it and opened the bottom drawer, the same drawer where the hair had been, where the financial documents were stored. I already knew the documents were intact. I had checked that morning, but I had not checked the folder at the very back of the drawer, the one that held miscellaneous household paperwork, warranty, service records, old utility agreements. I pulled it out and went through it page by page. Halfway through the folder, between a water heater warranty from 2019 and a pest inspection report from 2021, I found a document I had never seen before. It was a single page printed on plain white paper, no letterhead. At the top, in clean bold text, Member Financial Commitment Agreement. Below that, a series of clauses in formatted legal adjacent language, the kind of language designed to look official, without being subject to any actual legal framework. At the bottom of the page on the signature line was Jason's handwriting, his signature, his printed name beneath it, and a date from 8 weeks ago. I carried the page back to the kitchen and set it in front of Harold without saying anything. Harold read it. His jaw tightened progressively as he moved down the page, the same slow tightening of a man who was confirming something he had already suspected and finding no satisfaction in being right. "New Dawn Financial Partners," he said, reading from the document. He looked up at me. "That's the same name as the transfer account." "Yes," I said, "it is." Harold set the page down. Outside, a car moved slowly past the front of the house. Neither of us looked up. "Walter," Harold said, "we need Samuel here, not on the phone, here." "I already told him to come," I said. "He'll be here in 2 days." Before I tell you how my son reacted when I placed that document on the table in front of him, if you are still with me on Revenge, Dad, drop the number 9 in the comments right now. Just the number, that tells me you're here, and it tells me this story is worth finishing for you. A quick note, some elements of what follows have been shaped for storytelling purposes. If that's not for you, no hard feelings, you can step away here. But I think you'll want to stay. Jason came home at 9:47. I heard his key in the lock and his footsteps in the entryway, and the particular sound of him dropping his keys on the hook by the door. A sound so familiar it lived in my body. The same way the creak of the third stair did, the same way Eleanor's voice had the kind of sound you stop hearing consciously, because it has become part of the architecture of your daily life. Harold had gone home an hour earlier. The documents were still on the kitchen table, organized into their 3 piles exactly as Harold had left them. I had not moved them. I had thought about it, thought about putting everything away, approaching the conversation, slowly building toward it the way Samuel had advised. Then I thought about the floor plan and Harold's photographs, the capacity assessment, the renovation timeline, the words following transfer printed in clean, unhurried text by someone who had already decided my house was going to change hands and was simply working out the schedule. I left the documents on the table. Jason stopped in the kitchen doorway. His eyes moved from me to the table and back to me, and I watched his face go through 3 distinct expressions in under 2 seconds. Surprise, recognition, and then something that locked down over both of them, like a shutter closing. He crossed his arms over his chest. "What is all this?" he said. "Sit down, Jason. I'd rather stand." His voice had an edge to it that was new, not anger exactly, more like the rehearsed firmness of someone who had been coached on how to respond to this specific situation. "Whatever you think you found, Dad, I can explain." "Sit down," I said again. I kept my voice level. I had learned a long time ago that the quieter you speak in a dangerous situation, the more carefully people listen. He sat. I picked up the member financial commitment agreement and placed it on the table in front of him. I placed it squarely centered the way you place evidence in a deposition, deliberately without drama, letting the document speak before you do. Jason looked at it. The color drained from his face so quickly and so completely that I reached forward instinctively before I caught myself, the automatic response of a father who has watched his child go pale since the boy was 3 years old and running a fever. "That's a private document," Jason said. His voice had gone thin. "It has your signature on it," I said. "That makes it relevant to this conversation." He pushed back slightly from the table, without standing up. "The group helps people make commitments to their own growth. It's a symbolic gesture. It doesn't mean—" "Jason," I slid the bank transaction record across the table beside the agreement. 6 transfers, 6 weeks. $23,000 moved from the account your mother and I opened together in 2001. The account you were added to 7 years ago, because we trusted you into a company called New Dawn Financial Partners that I cannot find any legitimate public record of. I kept my eyes on his face. "That is not a symbolic gesture." Jason stared at the transaction record. His jaw worked. Something was moving behind his eyes. Not guilt, not exactly something more complicated than guilt. The expression of a person standing at the intersection of 2 versions of reality and not yet knowing which one to choose. "The money was mine to move," he said finally. His voice was barely above a murmur. "My share of the account. I had the legal right." "You did," I said. "That's not what I'm asking you about." I leaned forward slightly. "I'm asking you where it went. And I'm asking you whether you knew when you signed that agreement that the organization you signed it with had no verifiable legal standing, no licensed practitioners, and a leader with no credentials that any regulatory body in California would recognize." Jason's hands came up and pressed flat against the table, and I could see them trembling, a fine, rapid trembling that he was trying to control and couldn't quite manage. His eyes were wet at the edges, and the sight of it drove something sharp and deep into the center of my chest. "They help people," he said. "They helped me. When Mom died and everything fell apart at the same time, they were the only ones who—" His voice cracked across the middle, and he stopped, swallowed hard, started again. "You don't know what those first months were like. You were grieving too. I know that. But I was drowning, Dad, and nobody noticed, and they noticed." My throat tightened until I had to breathe carefully through it. "I noticed," I said. "I just didn't know how to reach you." "Neither did I." His voice dropped to almost nothing. "That's why I went." We looked at each other across the kitchen table, across the documents and the transaction records and the evidence of something I still didn't fully understand. And he was only beginning to, and I felt the ground shift under the conversation in a way I hadn't anticipated. Not toward resolution. Toward something rawer and more honest than either of us had managed since his mother's funeral. Then his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and something changed in his face immediately. The rawness closed over the shutter came down again, and the person sitting across from me was no longer entirely my son. He stood up. "I need to make a call. Jason, I'll be right back." He picked up the phone and walked out the back door into the garden. Through the kitchen window, I could see him pacing the narrow path, between Eleanor's rose bushes, one hand pressed to his ear, his head bent low. I looked at the documents on the table. I looked at Eleanor's garden through the window, dark now, except for the light spilling from the kitchen, her roses just visible as shapes in the shadows. I had 9 minutes before the back door opened again. When it did, Jason came inside and stood at the edge of the kitchen. His eyes were dry now, and his posture had reorganized itself into something more deliberate, more constructed. "Dad," he said, "the people in the group are worried about you. They think Victor thinks that you might be having some difficulty, cognitively." He said the last word carefully, like he was reading it off a card. They think it might be worth having someone come by, a professional, just to check in. I looked at my son standing in the doorway of the kitchen I had cooked breakfast in for 23 years and felt something I had not felt since the night I sat in Harold's car and watched the copper bowl burn, helpless. And then, almost immediately after, absolutely completely clear. "Good night, Jason," I said. He went upstairs. I picked up my phone and called Samuel. "They're going to report me to Adult Protective Services," I said when he answered. A pause. Then, "How soon?" "Tomorrow morning," I said. "I think." "Okay." Samuel's voice was steady and immediate. "Here's exactly what you're gonna do." Samuel talked me through it for 40 minutes the night before. Not in general terms. In specifics, what the Adult Protective Services intake process looked like in Los Angeles County, what a field assessment visit typically involved, what documentation I should have ready, and in what order, and what I should say, and what I should not say, under any circumstances. He had worked alongside APS investigators on 3 separate cases involving vulnerable adults and coercive organizations. And he knew the process the way I knew fire behavior, not from a manual, but from having watched it move through real situations in real buildings with real consequences. "You cooperate completely," Samuel said. "You are polite, you are calm, you are organized. You give them no reason to escalate the case, and you document everything from the moment the knock comes." "With what?" I asked. "California two-party consent. I can't record without consent." "You don't need to record," he said. "You need a notebook and a pen. Write down every question they ask and every answer you give with the time noted in the margin. That documentation is yours. It's admissible as a contemporaneous written record, and it doesn't require anyone's consent." He paused. "It also tells anyone who looks at it later that the man who was reported as cognitively impaired was organized enough to maintain detailed written records of his own assessment interview in real time." I had the notebook on the kitchen table before I went to bed. The knock came at 9:12 the next morning. The woman at my door was in her mid-30s with a county lanyard around her neck and a tablet in one hand and the carefully neutral expression of someone who had been trained to arrive without assumptions. Her name was on the lanyard Carver M. Adult Protective Services, Los Angeles County. She introduced herself as Michelle Carver and told me she had received a welfare concern report regarding a resident at this address and was here to conduct a routine wellness check. "Of course," I said. "Please come in." I had made coffee. I had put the documents from the night before into a folder in the study and closed the study door. The kitchen table held only 2 things: my coffee mug and the notebook Samuel had told me to prepare, open to the first page pen laid across the top. Michelle Carver sat down across from me. Her eyes moved to the notebook and back to my face with a flicker of something I couldn't quite read: surprise, maybe, or recalibration. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "I want to be transparent with you about why I'm here. We received a report expressing concern about your ability to manage your daily affairs independently. The report mentioned possible memory difficulties and episodes of confusion." She kept her voice even and professional. "I'm not here to make any determinations. I'm here to have a conversation." "I appreciate that," I said. I uncapped my pen. "Do you mind if I take notes while we talk? I find it helpful for keeping track of important conversations." Another flicker across her face. "Not at all." She took me through the standard cognitive assessment questions: date, day of the week, current address, names of family members, recent events I could describe. She asked me to count backward from 100 by 7s. She asked me about my daily routine, my medical history, my support network. She asked whether I had felt confused recently, whether I had experienced any episodes of disorientation, whether I had had any difficulty making decisions. I answered every question directly, accurately, and without elaboration beyond what was asked. I wrote down each question and my answer in the notebook, with the time noted in the left margin, the way Samuel had told me to. At 10:23, she closed her tablet and looked at me across the table with an expression that had shifted considerably from the careful neutrality she had arrived with. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "I want to ask you something outside the standard assessment. You don't have to answer it. Go ahead." The report we received was filed by a family member living at this address. She chose her words with visible care. In my experience, wellness concern reports filed by family members fall into 2 broad categories. The first is genuine concern. The second is, she paused, something else. I'm not drawing any conclusions today, but I want you to know that if you have concerns about your own situation here, there are resources available to you. I looked at her for a moment. Then I turned the notebook around and slid it across the table so she could read the last entry. I had written a single line at the bottom of the page, added that. Morning before she arrived, report filed by family member, currently associated with organization, under informal investigation for financial exploitation of members. Documentation of association available upon request. Michelle Carver read it. She read it again. Then she looked up at me with an expression that was no longer neutral in any direction. "Do you have that documentation with you?" she said. "I have some of it," I said. "The rest is being compiled." I stood up. "Would you like to see what I have?" She nodded. I brought the folder from the study. Not everything, just what was clearly relevant and clearly documented: Harold's photographs of the Phase 2 assessment documents, the bank transaction records showing the 6 transfers, the member financial commitment agreement with Jason's signature, and the handwritten notes I had made of my conversations with Samuel and Diane. Michelle Carver went through each document without rushing. She took photographs of several pages with her tablet. When she was done, she closed the folder and handed it back to me with both hands, the careful gesture of someone returning something they recognize as significant. "Victor Bennett," she said, "I'm going to be honest with you. Based on this visit, I have no basis for any finding of cognitive impairment or inability to manage independent living." She stood and picked up her tablet. "I'm also going to note in my report that the individual who filed this concern may have motivations that warrant further consideration." She held out her hand. "Thank you for your time and your cooperation." I shook her hand. "Thank you for doing your job properly," I said. I walked her to the door. When it closed, I stood in my own entryway and let out a long breath that felt like it had been stored in my chest since 9:47 the previous evening. Then I heard Jason's footsteps at the top of the stairs. He came halfway down and stopped gripping the banister with both hands, his knuckles going white. His face was doing something complicated and painful, the expression of a man who had expected a different outcome and was now standing in the wreckage of that expectation, trying to understand how it had happened. "Dad," he said. His voice was ragged. "I didn't want—" "I know," I said, and then because it was true, and because he needed to hear something true right now. "But you did it anyway, and we're going to have to figure out what that means." I walked back to the kitchen and picked up my phone to call Samuel. Jason sat down on the stairs and put his face in his hands, and the sound he made was not quite crying and not quite anything else, just the sound of someone whose certainty had just developed its first serious crack. Samuel Carter arrived at 2:15 in the afternoon, driving a 10-year-old Volvo that had a UCLA faculty parking sticker on the windshield and 3 cardboard boxes of files stacked on the back seat. He was 57 years old, broad-shouldered with close-cropped gray hair, and the kind of face that had been deeply lined by decades of listening to things that were hard to hear. He wore a flannel shirt and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead, and he carried a laptop bag over one shoulder and a paper bag from a sandwich place on Lake Avenue over the other. He walked through my front door, set the sandwich bag on the kitchen table, looked around the room with the quick systematic scan of a man assessing an unfamiliar environment, and said, "Where's Jason?" "Upstairs," I said. "He hasn't come down since this morning." Samuel nodded. "Good. We'll talk first." He pulled out a chair and sat down, opened the laptop and looked at me across the table with the direct, unhurried attention that had always been the thing I trusted most about him. "Tell me everything that's happened since we spoke last night. In order, don't edit." I told him about Michelle Carver, about the notebook, about the way Jason had looked standing on the stairs afterward, the knuckles white on the banister, the sound he had made that wasn't quite crying. Samuel listened without interrupting his fingers, occasionally moving to type something brief into the laptop, his eyes never leaving my face. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The APS visit is actually useful to us." I stared at him. "Explain that." "Michelle Carver photographed your documentation and noted in her report that the filing party may have ulterior motivations." Samuel turned the laptop to face me, showing a split screen on the left, a California APS case procedure document on the right, notes he had been typing as I spoke. "That creates an official county record that contradicts the narrative Victor is trying to build about you. It's time-stamped. It's in a government database. It cannot be altered." He pulled the laptop back. "Victor overplayed his hand. He moved too fast because you came home early and disrupted his timeline. People who move too fast make mistakes they can't walk back." I pulled one of the sandwiches out of the bag because I realized I had not eaten anything since the previous evening, and my hands were beginning to feel the particular lightness that comes from running too long on adrenaline and coffee. "What about Jason?" I said. "He filed that report, Sam. My son filed a report with Adult Protective Services claiming I'm losing my mind." Samuel looked at me steadily. "Yes," he said. "He did. And I want you to understand something important about that, because how you process it will determine whether you lose him permanently or get him back." He leaned forward slightly. "Jason did not file that report because he believes you are cognitively impaired. He filed it because Victor told him to, and he has been conditioned over 16 months to respond to Victor's directives as though they are his own decisions. He is not your adversary, Walter. He is a person who has been systematically separated from his own judgment." My chest hurt in the old familiar way. "That doesn't make it hurt less." "No," Samuel said. "It doesn't. But it changes what you do with the hurt." He reached into the laptop bag and withdrew a thick manila folder. "Now, I need to show you something I found this morning." He opened the folder and laid a printed article on the table between us. It was from the Phoenix New Times dated March 2018. The headline read, "Scottsdale Wellness Leader. Faces scrutiny over member coercion claims." The photograph beneath the headline showed Victor Hale, younger by 7 years, hair fully dark, but the pale gray eyes and the carefully calibrated expression were identical. The name in the caption read Richard Voss. I pressed 2 fingers hard against my mouth to keep my expression from doing something I didn't want it to do. "Richard Voss," I said. "Victor Hale," Samuel confirmed. "Same person. Different name, different city, same organizational structure." He tapped the article. In 2018, a group he was running in Scottsdale, Arizona, came under investigation by the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. 12 families filed complaints: financial exploitation, psychological coercive control, isolation of members from family. The investigation was building toward criminal charges. What happened? Samuel's jaw tightened. The primary witness was a woman named Margaret Holloway. She had been a senior member of the organization for 2 years and had direct knowledge of the financial mechanisms Victor was using. She agreed to cooperate with the county attorney. He paused. 2 weeks before her scheduled deposition, her son received an unexpected job offer in another state. A very good offer, the kind that's difficult to turn down. He took it and moved within 10 days. "And she withdrew," I said. "The morning of her deposition," Samuel said. "Without her testimony, the remaining complaints were insufficient for criminal charges. The investigation was closed." He closed the folder. "Margaret Holloway currently lives in San Diego. I have her address." He looked at me. "And Walter?" "I called her this morning, before I drove up. I asked if she'd be willing to speak with all of us together. She said yes without hesitating. She talked to you." "Briefly," Samuel said. "Enough for me to know she's ready. She said she will not withdraw again." He picked up his phone. "I think she should tell you the rest herself." The afternoon light through the kitchen window was going golden, the particular late afternoon gold of Southern California in August that had always made the backyard look like a painting. Eleanor had loved that light. She used to bring her coffee out to the back porch, specifically to sit in it for the 20 minutes before it faded. I looked at the article on the table. Richard Voss, Victor Hale, the same man in 2 cities with 2 names and at least 2 sets of families whose lives he had moved through like a slow fire, taking what was available and leaving the rest to sort out the damage. "There's one more thing," Samuel said. He reached into the folder again and withdrew a second printed page. "I ran the New Dawn Financial Partners LLC through the California Department of Financial Protection and Innovation this morning. Nevada registration as you found. The registered agent is listed as Richard Voss." He laid the page on top of the article. "Same name. And the registered address for the LLC is the same street address as New Horizons Center in Old Pasadena." I looked at both documents on the table. The LLC that had received $23,000 of Jason's money from the account Eleanor and I had built together over 20 years was registered to the same man under the same false name he had used in Arizona, at the address of the building he operated out of 3 miles from my house. "He didn't even change the address," Harold said from the doorway. I turned. Harold had let himself in through the back, which he had been doing for 20 years and which neither of us had ever considered unusual. He was holding his notebook and looking at the documents on the table with the expression of a man who has spent 30 years in insurance fraud investigation and recognizes the specific arrogance of someone who has never been caught and has stopped believing they ever will be. "No," Samuel said. "He didn't, because he's never had to. Every time someone got close, the investigation collapsed before it reached him." He looked at me. "Until now." I looked at Harold. Harold looked at me. Outside, a car moved slowly down Rosevilla Street and turned at the corner and disappeared. "We need to make a call," I said, "to San Diego." Samuel was already reaching for his phone. Samuel set his phone on the kitchen table and angled it so the camera faced us both. Harold pulled his chair around to my side of the table without being asked. The three of us sat in a row facing the screen, and Samuel dialed. It rang 4 times. Then the screen filled with the face of a woman who looked like she had spent 5 years carrying something that had no good place to be set down. Margaret Holloway was 50 years old, with light brown hair pulled back simply, and eyes that were a clear, pale blue striking eyes, the kind that would have been described as warm in a different context. In this context, they were careful, watchful, the eyes of someone who had learned to assess the intentions of the person in front of her before deciding how much of herself to offer. She looked at Samuel first, then at Harold, then at me, and she held my gaze for a moment longer than the others. "Mr. Bennett," she said. Her voice was steady and unhurried. "Samuel told me about your son." "He told me about yours," I said. Something moved across her face, not pain exactly. Something older than pain, the expression of a wound that had long since stopped being acute and become simply part of the landscape. "Then we understand each other," she said. "Tell me about Phoenix," I said. "Tell me what he did." She told us. She had joined the organization in early 2016 at a time when her marriage had ended, and her son had just left for college, and the house she had lived in for 18 years felt like a building she had accidentally wandered into and couldn't find the exit for. The group it had been called the New Light Path, then not the Ash Circle, but the structure was identical, had offered her exactly what she had needed at exactly the moment she needed it: community, purpose, the particular comfort of being told that her confusion was not a personal failing, but a temporary condition that the group could help her move through. "He's very good at finding the moment," she said. "The specific moment when a person is open, when their defenses are down, not because they're weak, but because they're human, and they've just taken a loss and they're still figuring out what the new shape of their life looks like." Her voice was even and precise, the voice of someone who had spent considerable time turning this experience into something she could describe without being destroyed by the describing. "He found my moment. He finds everyone's moment. It's the only thing he's genuinely talented at." "How long before you realized something was wrong?" Harold asked. 8 months before I admitted it to myself," she said. "I knew something was wrong at 4 months. I just had too much invested by then to look at it directly." She shifted slightly in front of the camera. "The financial component started at month 3. Small amounts at first, $100 here, $250 there, framed as voluntary contributions to the community fund. By month 8, I had transferred over $40,000. My stomach clenched. $40,000 in 8 months. "When did you decide to cooperate with the county attorney?" Samuel asked. "When I found out I wasn't the only one," she said. "When I found out there were 11 other families, and that several of them had lost significantly more than I had, and that at least 3 members had cut off all contacts with their families completely and showed no signs of wanting to return." She pressed her lips together briefly. "I thought about those 3 people every day while the investigation was building. I told myself that my testimony was for them as much as for myself." "And then your son got the job offer," I said. Her jaw tightened. "The offer came from a company he had applied to 8 months earlier and never heard back from. Suddenly, 2 weeks before my deposition, they called him with an offer that was 30% above market rate for his field and covered his relocation costs in full." She looked directly into the camera. "I have never been able to prove that Victor arranged it. I have never been able to prove he didn't." "But you withdrew," Harold said. "It wasn't an accusation, just a fact stated plainly." "I withdrew," she said, "because my son was 24 years old, and he didn't know anything about what was happening, and he was so excited about that offer. And I looked at his face on the phone when he called to tell me, and I couldn't—" She stopped, pressed 2 fingers hard against the bridge of her nose. Her voice, when it came back, was rougher than before. I couldn't be the reason that opportunity disappeared, even if the opportunity was manufactured, even if it was a trap. He didn't know, and I couldn't make him pay for what I knew. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, a mockingbird was running through its repertoire in Eleanor's garden, the short, rapid phrases it repeated and varied and repeated again, filling the afternoon with something that sounded almost like conversation. "Mrs. Holloway," I said, "my son is 38 years old. He filed a report with Adult Protective Services yesterday claiming I'm losing my mind. He signed a financial document that transferred $23,000 into a company Victor controls under a false name." I paused because the next part was the hardest part. "And 2 nights ago, I stood outside my own house in the dark and watched him write my name on a piece of paper and burn it in a bowl because a man he's known for 16 months told him it was the path to a better version of himself." Margaret Holloway looked at me through the screen. Her eyes were wet now, but they were steady. The particular steadiness of a person who has cried so many times about a specific thing that the crying no longer interferes with the functioning. "I'm going to tell you something," she said, "that I should have told someone 5 years ago." She straightened in her chair. "Victor Hale has a template. He uses it in every city with every group, and it works because it exploits the same human needs every time: the need to belong, the need to be understood, the need to believe that the pain you're carrying has a purpose and a path through it." Her voice hardened slightly, gaining an edge that had not been there before. "He has been doing this for at least 15 years, across at least 4 states that I know of, and he has never once been held accountable for any of it." She looked directly into the camera, and her pale blue eyes were absolutely clear. "I will give you everything I have," she said. "Every document I kept, every record, everything I should have given the Maricopa County attorney 5 years ago and didn't." Her voice did not waver. "Tell me what you need and when you need it." Samuel leaned forward. "We're going to be filing with the California Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division and the LAPD Financial Crimes Unit. We need a written statement, the financial records you mentioned, and confirmation that you're willing to be contacted by investigators directly." "You have all of it," Margaret said. "All of it, whenever you need it." I looked at her through the screen, this woman in San Diego who had made a choice 5 years ago that she had been living inside ever since, the weight of it, visible in the careful way she held herself, in the watchfulness behind her pale blue eyes. "Mrs. Holloway," I said. "Thank you." She shook her head once firmly. "Don't thank me yet," she said. "Thank me when it's done." She looked at me steadily. "And Mr. Bennett, your son, is not lost. I watched people come out of that organization after the investigation in Phoenix, people who had been in far deeper than Jason for far longer. They came back." Her voice was quiet but certain. "It takes time, but they come back." The call ended. The screen went dark. Harold set both palms flat on the table and exhaled through his nose a long, controlled sound. Samuel closed his laptop with a quiet click and sat back in his chair, pressing one hand over his eyes for a moment, the way people do when they have been holding their focus very tight for a very long time and are taking 3 seconds to release it. I looked at the dark phone screen. Outside, the mockingbird had gone quiet. The afternoon light through the window was beginning to go gold and long. Then my own phone lit up on the table beside Samuel's. A number I didn't recognize. A number with no name attached, showing only the digits. I looked at it for 1 full second before I answered. "Mr. Bennett." The voice was low and unhurried and warm in a way that made the hair on the back of my neck rise immediately. "This is Victor Hale. I think it's time we spoke honestly with each other." I looked at Samuel. He was already reaching across the table, turning his phone face down, nodding once with his eyes. A gesture that said, "Put it on speaker. Let us hear. Say nothing about us being here." Harold set his pen against his notebook and held it there ready. I accepted the call and set my phone flat on the table between the 3 of us, speaker on volume low enough that only we could hear. "Mr. Hale," I said. My voice came out even. I was grateful for that. "Walter, may I call you Walter?" He didn't wait for an answer. "I want to begin by saying that I have nothing but respect for the kind of love that drives a father to fight for his child. It's one of the most powerful forces in human experience. I've seen it many times." A brief pause, not hesitant, calculated. "I've also seen it cause significant damage when it's directed by fear rather than understanding." "Is that what you think is happening here?" I said. "Fear." I think you came home and found something unfamiliar, Victor said. And unfamiliar things are frightening for people who have spent their lives in environments where control and predictability are survival tools. Firefighting, for example. You cannot operate in that environment without absolute certainty about the systems around you. I looked at Samuel across the table. Samuel's expression had not changed. He was listening the way he listened in clinical settings, cataloging, filing, building a picture from the specific words being chosen and the specific words being avoided. Tell me about Richard Voss, I said. The silence that followed lasted exactly 4 seconds. Not the silence of confusion, the silence of a man who has just had a door opened that he had believed was locked and is deciding in real time which way to step. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Victor said. His voice had not changed in warmth or pace, which was itself the tell. A person who genuinely didn't know the name would have asked a follow-up question. Victor did not ask a follow-up question. The name on the Nevada LLC that received $23,000 from my son's account, I said. The same name attached to a wellness organization in Scottsdale, Arizona that was under investigation by the Maricopa County attorney in 2018 before the primary witness withdrew her testimony 2 weeks before her deposition. Another silence, shorter this time. Then Victor said, Walter, I can hear that someone has been helping you construct a narrative. I want you to consider the possibility that the narrative you've been given is incomplete. Incomplete how? People who leave organizations like ours, and I say this without judgment, often experience what clinicians call exit mythology. They reframe their experience in retrospect to make sense of their departure. The stories become more extreme over time because extreme stories are easier to walk away from than complicated ones. His voice was gentle, patient, the voice of a man explaining something to someone who genuinely cannot see what is right in front of them. Whatever you've been told about Phoenix, I'd encourage you to consider the source and the motivation. Harold wrote something in his notebook and turned it so I could read it without moving. He's confirming Phoenix without admitting it. He was right. Victor had not denied being in Phoenix. He had not denied being Richard Voss. He had redirected, which was a form of confirmation that would hold up to exactly the kind of scrutiny a good attorney would apply. Let me ask you something directly, I said. Is my son free to leave your organization whenever he chooses? Right now, today, if he decided he wanted to? Of course, Victor said without hesitation. We are not a closed community. We don't hold anyone. Then why does he believe that leaving would mean losing everything he's built in the last 16 months? A pause, smaller than the others. I wouldn't characterize his feelings that way. I'm not asking how you'd characterize it, I said. I'm asking you to explain it. The warmth in Victor's voice shifted almost imperceptibly, still present, but with something underneath it now, something denser and less managed. The specific register of a man who has decided that the conversation is no longer going the way he intended and is considering his options. Walter, he said, and his voice came back fully warm, fully patient, smooth as a surface that had been disturbed and quickly resettled. I understand that you're frightened. I understand that you feel you're losing your son. Those feelings are real, and they deserve to be honored. He paused. But there are forces at work here that you don't fully understand yet, and I want you to think carefully before you take steps that cannot be undone. Another pause, deliberate, waited. Sometimes the most loving thing a father can do is trust that his son is capable of knowing what he needs. And sometimes, I said, the most loving thing a father can do is not stop until his son is safe. Silence. Then Victor said, very quietly, very evenly, Mr. Bennett, I've enjoyed our conversation. I hope you'll give some thought to what I've said. The warmth was still there, but it had taken on a different quality, like sunlight through glass, present but no longer direct. Take care of yourself. Good night. The call ended. The three of us sat without speaking for a moment. Not the silence of having nothing to say, but the silence of people who had just heard something significant and were still running it through their minds. Harold spoke first. He tapped his notebook with the end of his pen. He called from an unlisted number. He referenced Phoenix without naming it. He didn't deny being Richard Voss. He looked at me. And he ended with a statement that a good prosecutor could frame as an implied warning. He knows we've talked to Margaret, Samuel said. His voice was flat and certain. The timing is not coincidental. He called within minutes of that conversation ending, which means he either has a way of monitoring her communications Or he's been watching for signs that someone was building a case and the Margaret call tripped a wire somewhere. He pressed both hands flat on the table. Walter, we need to move faster than I originally planned. My phone was still face up on the table between us. I looked at it at the blank screen showing the ended call, the faint reflection of the kitchen ceiling in the dark glass. Good night, I said, not to Samuel, not to Harold, to the blank screen. Because Victor Hale had said it as a dismissal, the polite final closing of a door, by a man who had decided the conversation was beneath him and was moving on to whatever came next. He had made a mistake in that dismissal, not a large one. But I had spent 35 years learning that the mistakes which brought structures down were rarely large. They were small, and they compounded, and they moved through a building in ways no one anticipated until the moment the ceiling gave way. Tomorrow morning, I said, we call the California AG and LAPD both. We put everything on the table. Samuel was already opening his laptop. Harold uncapped his pen and turned to a fresh page in his notebook and wrote the date at the top in the clean, precise handwriting of a man who had spent 30 years knowing that the date at the top of the page was always the first thing that mattered. Outside, the last of the afternoon light was gone. Rosevilla Street was dark and quiet, the houses along it lit from inside, each one a small, separate world. Somewhere up the stairs, Jason was in his room. Awake, I was almost certain, listening to the silence of a house that had stopped pretending everything was normal. I was counting on that. Samuel and Harold left at 9. I made 2 cups of coffee at 10:15, set one on Jason's side of the table, and sat down to wait. No documents, no folders, no evidence arranged in careful piles. Just the kitchen, the 2 mugs, and the particular quiet of a house where something important was about to happen, or wasn't. He came through the front door at 10:42. I had watched him come up the porch steps with his phone in his hand, finishing a message before he pushed through the door. He stopped when he saw the light on in the kitchen. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, long enough that I could see him deciding whether to come in or go straight upstairs, and then he came in. He looked at the second mug, he looked at me. Sit down, Jason, I said. Please. He sat. I didn't lead with Victor. I didn't lead with the LLC, or the documents, or Margaret Holloway, or anything that would make him feel cornered before he had taken a single sip of coffee. I led with his mother. Your mom used to say that the hardest part of loving someone wasn't the big moments, I said. It was the Tuesday mornings, the ordinary days when nothing dramatic was happening and you still had to choose to show up for each other. I wrapped both hands around my mug. I was not always good at the Tuesday mornings, Jason. After she got sick, I got worse at them. I was so focused on managing the situation that I stopped just being there. Jason's hands tightened around his mug. His jaw moved once, working against something. I know you were drowning after she died, I said. I know I was so deep in my own grief that I couldn't see yours clearly. And I know that when you found people who saw it, who told you that your pain made sense and that you belonged somewhere that felt like being pulled to the surface after a long time underwater. My voice came out rougher than I intended on the last part. I let it. I understand why you went. I need you to know that. Jason's eyes had gone bright and wet at the corners. He pressed his lips together hard and stared at the surface of the table. But, Jason, I kept my voice steady. The man who offered you that lifeline is using it to pull you somewhere you don't want to go. And the people around him are not your family. They are people with a function in a plan that was designed long before you walked into that seminar and met Victor Hale. Jason's breath came out shaky and uneven. You don't know what it felt like, Dad, to finally feel like someone understood. I know, I said. And I'm telling you that feeling was real. What he did with it isn't. A long moment passed. Outside the neighborhood was completely still. The kind of still that only happens very late at night in residential streets when everyone has gone to bed and the world contracts down to whatever room you're sitting in. Jason set his mug down. When he looked up, his eyes were red-rimmed and his face had the stripped, exhausted quality of someone who has been holding a position for a very long time and is running out of the energy to hold it. I didn't want to hurt you, he said. His voice cracked clean across the middle. With the APS thing. Victor said it was the right way to create space. He said, he stopped, pressed the back of his hand against his mouth for a moment. I knew it was wrong when I was doing it. I knew it. Something broke open in my chest. Not painfully, just open the way a door opens when someone finally puts the key in correctly, after a long time of trying the wrong ones. I know you did, I said. I don't know how to get out, Jason said. His voice was barely above a whisper now, ragged and honest in a way it hadn't been since his mother's funeral. Every time I think about leaving it, feels like I'll have nothing. Like everything I've built in the last 16 months disappears, and I'm back in that first week after Mom died, just standing in the kitchen, not knowing what to do with my hands. I reached across the table and put my hand over his. His fingers were cold. "You won't have nothing," I said. "You'll have me." He looked at me across the table with his red-rimmed eyes and his face that looked younger than it had in years, the face of my son, my actual son, not the version that had been constructed and polished and aimed at someone else's purposes. "What happens tomorrow?" he said. I looked at him steadily. "Tomorrow some things are going to change," I said. "And I need to ask you, is there anything you want to tell me before they do?" Jason looked down at the table. His hands turned over under mine, so his fingers wrapped around my palm. He held on the way he had held onto my hand the first night he slept in a real bed after Eleanor brought him home from the hospital 38 years ago, when his grip was the size of my thumb and felt like the most important thing I had ever been trusted with. "Dad," he said, "I've been recording things on my phone." He looked up. "The meetings, I didn't know why I was doing it. I couldn't stop myself." I looked at my son. "How long?" I said. 3 weeks, he said. I tightened my hand around his and did not say anything else, because there was nothing else to say, and because sometimes the right response to the best possible news is simply to hold on. Jason went to bed at midnight. I sat at the kitchen table for another hour after he went upstairs, not moving, not doing anything in particular, just sitting in the quiet of the house with my hands around a mug that had gone cold. I thought about Eleanor. I thought about the way she used to say that the most dangerous thing in any structure wasn't the obvious damage, the cracked beam, the compromised foundation. It was the damage that looked like nothing from the outside and was everything from within. At 7 the next morning, Diane arrived with a box of pastries from a bakery on Foothill Boulevard, and the particular energy of a woman who had not slept but had spent the sleepless hours doing something useful. Samuel was already at the table with his laptop open. Harold came through the back door 12 minutes later with his notebook and 2 extra pens. The 4 of us sat down and built the case from the beginning. Harold opened his notebook to the first entry. August 6th, 10:14 at night, the first car without headlights. He read each entry aloud slowly, while Samuel cross-referenced the dates with the bank transaction records, and Diane compared timestamps against the internal group documents Lily had sent home 16 months ago. "Every transfer happened within 48 hours of a group gathering," Samuel said without looking up from the laptop. "Every single one. That's not correlation. That's operational cadence." Harold set down the 7 photographs he had taken, the Phase 2 assessment, the floor plan of my house with its capacity notations, the internal action item list with Jason's name, and the phrase asset relationship management. He laid them in a row across the center of the table. Diane set beside them the documents Lily had sent, including the page that listed my address under priority property assets. Her hands were steady this time. She had been carrying these papers for over a year, and the act of finally laying them on a table for a purpose felt like putting down something very heavy with both hands. I added the member financial commitment agreement, with Jason's signature, the bank transaction record showing the 6 transfers to New Dawn Financial Partners, and the contemporaneous written notes I had made of every conversation with Jason, with Victor, with Michelle Carver from Adult Protective Services, with Margaret Holloway. Samuel looked at everything spread across the table and said, "Margaret's statement arrives by email this afternoon. I confirmed with her this morning at 6. "She was awake at 6, Diane said. "She said she hadn't slept," Samuel said. "She said she wanted to get it done before she had time to second-guess herself." He closed his laptop, briefly opened it again. "She won't second-guess herself, but I understand the instinct." Samuel made the call to the California Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division at 9:17. He was on hold for 11 minutes, then spoke to an intake coordinator for 26 minutes. When he ended the call, he looked at the table and said, "They're logging it as a formal complaint. They want the full documentation package submitted digitally by end of business today." They said, given the cross-state pattern and the LLC registration irregularities, it may qualify for referral to the Federal Trade Commission as well. Harold was already dialing his former colleague at LAPD Financial Crimes Unit when Samuel finished speaking. Harold's call was shorter and more direct. the conversation of two people who had worked adjacent fields for decades and had no need for preamble. He hung up after 9 minutes and said, "They want the bank records, the LLC documentation, and Margaret's statement. They're pulling the New Horizons Center business registration this afternoon." Diane looked up from the table. Her eyes were bright with the particular brightness of someone who has been waiting a very long time for a room full of people to finally be moving in the right direction. "What happens now?" she said, to Victor specifically. "That depends on what the investigators find when they start pulling threads," Samuel said. "What we've given them today is enough to open a formal investigation. Wire fraud under federal statute, financial elder abuse under California, welfare and institutions code, coercive control under AB 3074, and practicing psychology without a license under the Business and Professions Code." He paused. "And with Margaret's statement establishing a prior pattern across state lines, there's a credible argument for a broader federal case." Diane pressed both hands flat against the table and breathed out slowly. Harold wrote something in his notebook. I looked at the document spread across Eleanor's kitchen table, the table where Jason had eaten breakfast every morning for 3 years of high school, where Eleanor had paid bills on Sunday afternoons, where I had sat alone for 2 years drinking coffee and trying to understand what a house felt like when the person who made it a home was no longer in it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number that I recognized immediately as the same unlisted number Victor had called from the night before. The message read, "I hope your conversation with your son went well last night." I showed it to Samuel. He photographed it with his phone without a word. Harold added it to the documentation log with the timestamp and the originating number. "He's watching the house," Harold said. "Let him watch," I said. "We're done building. We're done." The documentation package went to the California Attorney General's office at 4:51 in the afternoon. Samuel confirmed receipt at 5:12. Harold drove home at 6. Diane left 20 minutes after Harold, pausing at the door to squeeze my arm with both hands and say, "Tomorrow," in the tone of someone who has been waiting to say that word for a very long time. By 7 o'clock the house was quiet. I made dinner nothing elaborate, just soup from a can and bread from the freezer. The kind of meal you make when eating is a mechanical necessity rather than an event. I set 2 bowls on the table. I didn't know if Jason would come down. I set them anyway. He came down at 7:23. He was wearing the same gray sweatshirt he'd had on the morning Victor had come to the house, the morning all of this had moved from suspicion into certainty, and seeing it made something tighten briefly in my chest before I let it go. He looked at the 2 bowls. He sat down without being asked. We ate for a few minutes without speaking, and it was not the silence of 2 people who had nothing to say, but the silence of 2 people who had said enough for one day and were simply being present in the same room, which is sometimes the most complicated thing 2 people can manage. Jason broke it first. "Are they coming tomorrow?" he said. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the bowl in front of him, moving the spoon in a slow circle. "Yes," I said. He nodded. His jaw worked once. "To the center." "Yes." He set the spoon down, pressed both palms flat against the table, the way I had seen him do as a child when he was trying to stay calm about something that frightened him, a habit so old and so specific that seeing it at 38 made my chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with the particular pain of watching someone you love carry something they shouldn't have to carry alone. "Dad," he said, "I need to tell you something." "I'm listening." He looked up. His eyes were clear, not the glassy, distant clarity of someone who has handed their thinking over to someone else, but the raw, exhausted clarity of someone who has been doing hard thinking entirely alone and has arrived somewhere difficult and true. "I knew something was wrong," he said. "Not at the beginning. At the beginning it felt like breathing after a long time of not being able to. But around month 6, maybe 7, Victor started asking for things that didn't feel right. Small things at first. Skip this family dinner. Don't return that call. Write this letter to your father, explaining why you need space." His voice tightened at the edges. I told myself each one was reasonable. I told myself I was making choices. But somewhere along the way, I stopped being able to tell the difference between my choices and his instructions. I kept my eyes on his face and didn't say anything because he wasn't finished, and he needed to get there on his own. The recordings. He wrapped his hands around his water glass. "I started them because Victor said something in a meeting about the Rosevilla property used. Your address talked about renovation, timelines, talked about what would need to happen before the transfer could be finalized. His voice dropped, and something in me just wouldn't let it go, wouldn't let me pretend I hadn't heard it. He looked at me. I didn't know what I was going to do with the recordings. I just knew I couldn't delete them. You kept them for 3 weeks, I said. I kept them because I couldn't stop hearing your voice in my head, telling me that a good man does the right thing even when it costs him something. His own voice cracked on the last 4 words, cracked and didn't recover, and he pressed the back of his hand hard against his mouth, the way he had done since he was a little boy, trying not to cry in front of people. Mom used to say the same thing. Different words, same thing. My eyes burned. I let them burn. "Jason," I said, "look at me." He looked at me. His eyes were red and wet and completely his own, not the eyes of a man who had been told what to see, but the eyes of my son, the boy I had driven home from the hospital 38 years ago, with his mother's hand in mine and his small face turned toward the window, watching the streetlights go by. "Tomorrow is going to be hard," I said. "There are going to be things that happen that you can't take back. People you've cared about who are going to be frightened and confused. And you are going to have to stand in the middle of all of that and make decisions about what you're willing to do." He nodded tight and quick. "But you are not going to be standing there alone," I said. "Do you understand me?" His chin was trembling now, the fine, rapid trembling of someone fighting hard to hold something back and losing the fight incrementally. His hands gripped the water glass until his knuckles went pale. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. The words came out broken, each one separate, like he was lifting them individually and setting them down with great care. "I'm sorry for what I did, for the money, for the report, for the paper." His voice dropped to almost nothing on the last word. "For writing your name on that paper." I stood up from my chair and moved around the table and put both arms around my son's shoulders, and he bent forward and pressed his face against my forearm, and the sound he made was not quiet. It was the sound of something that had been held under pressure for a very long time, finally releasing loud and ragged and completely unguarded. I held on until the shaking in his shoulders stopped. Outside, Rose Villa Street was dark and still. Eleanor's garden was just visible through the window, the shapes of her rose bushes soft in the dim light from the kitchen, the perennials she had planted 12 years ago that came back every spring, without needing anyone to tell them to. I held on. I did not sleep. Not because I was anxious, or not only because of that, more because the house felt different in the hours after Jason and I sat at the kitchen table. Different in a way I couldn't name precisely, but could feel in the quality of the air, the way you can feel the pressure change before a weather system moves through. Something had shifted, not resolved shifted. The way a structure shifts when a load-bearing element that has been under stress for a long time is finally carefully relieved. Jason slept. I could hear his breathing through the ceiling above the kitchen, the slow, even rhythm of genuine sleep, and I was grateful for it in a way that sat deep in my chest and didn't move. At 5:45 in the morning, my phone buzzed on the nightstand. Samuel's name on the screen. I answered before the second buzz. "We're a go," Samuel said. 6 o'clock, LAPD Pasadena Division and 2 investigators from the AG's office. They want us on the street, not inside. "I'll be outside in 10 minutes, I said. I dressed in the dark. I did not wake Jason. The morning was cool and gray, the particular gray of early August mornings in Pasadena, before the heat built, when the marine layer still held over the San Gabriel Valley, and the streets were quiet enough that you could hear the mockingbirds starting up in the liquid amber trees. I walked down Rose Villa Street toward old Pasadena with my hands in my pockets and my breath coming out in small, visible clouds, and I thought about nothing in particular, which was a skill I had learned in 35 years of walking toward burning buildings. The ability to empty the mind of everything except the next step, the next breath, the next decision directly in front of you. Samuel was already there when I arrived on Colorado Boulevard, standing on the sidewalk across from the New Horizons Center with a paper coffee cup in each hand. He gave me one without speaking. We stood side by side and drank. At 6:02, 3 vehicles pulled to the curb in front of the building. 2 LAPD cruisers and an unmarked sedan that had government plates and the specific anonymity of a car specifically designed not to be remembered. 4 officers got out of the cruisers. 2 individuals in civilian clothing got out of the sedan. One carried a document case, the other a laptop bag. They moved to the front entrance of the New Horizons Center, with the unhurried, organized efficiency of people who had done this many times and understood that urgency and speed were not the same thing. I watched the door open. I watched them go inside. Samuel put his hand briefly on my shoulder and then took it away. 11 minutes later, the people started coming out. They came in small groups, 2, 3 at a time, some of them looking around with a blinking, disoriented expression of people who had been inside a building that has just lost its structural logic, who were stepping out into daylight and finding it both brighter and more ordinary than they had expected. Several were crying. One young woman sat down directly on the front steps and put her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking hard. A man in his 50s stood at the edge of the sidewalk with his arms crossed over his chest and his jaw set in the rigid way of someone who was not going to cry in public and was spending considerable energy on that commitment. I was watching for Jason. He came out 7th. He was wearing a jacket I had given him 3 Christmases ago. Dark green, fleece-lined, the kind of practical gift that Eleanor had always said I defaulted to, because I was constitutionally incapable of buying anything decorative. He stepped through the door and stopped on the top step and looked at the street with an expression I had not seen on his face in over a year. Lost. Completely and genuinely lost. Not the managed, directed confusion of someone who had been told what to think about their lostness, but the raw, unmediated disorientation of someone standing in a place they suddenly don't recognize and trying to remember the way back to somewhere they know. I crossed the street. He saw me when I was halfway across. His face did something complicated in rapid relief and shame arriving simultaneously, fighting each other for the same territory. And then he came down the steps toward me, and we met on the sidewalk in front of a building that had been the center of his life for 16 months, and would never be that again. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. He put his arms around me and held on with the particular desperate tightness of someone grabbing a fixed point in moving water, and I held him back with both arms and felt the shaking in his shoulders that he was trying to control and couldn't. "I've got you," I said against the top of his head. "I've got you." He pulled back after a moment, wiping his face with the back of his hand, visibly trying to reassemble himself. "Where's Victor?" he said. "Inside," I said. "With the investigators." Jason nodded. Something moved through his expression. Not satisfaction, something quieter than that, the particular quiet of a decision that has been made and cannot now be unmade, and is being acknowledged rather than celebrated. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his phone. "I need to talk to someone," he said. "From the investigation." Samuel appeared at my shoulder. "I can take you to them," he said. The 3 of us walked to the unmarked sedan, where one of the civilian investigators was standing with her document case open on the hood of the car, reviewing something on a tablet. She looked up when we approached. "This is Jason Bennett," Samuel said. "He has information he'd like to provide voluntarily." The investigator looked at Jason with the careful, neutral assessment of someone whose job required her to evaluate people quickly and accurately. "What kind of information?" she said. Jason unlocked his phone and opened the audio application. He turned the screen toward her so she could see the file list, 11 recordings, the longest running, 47 minutes, the most recent from 4 days ago. "I recorded 11 group meetings over the past 3 weeks, Jason said. His voice was steady, which I knew cost him something. "I was a member. I was present voluntarily at all of them. I didn't know if what I was doing was right, but I couldn't delete them." The investigator looked at the file list. Then she looked at Jason. Then she looked at her colleague who had walked over during Jason's explanation and was now reading the file timestamps over her shoulder. "Mr. Bennett," she said, "we're going to need to discuss the circumstances of these recordings in detail before we can assess their potential use in the investigation. But I want you to know that what you've just done coming forward voluntarily before being asked that matters." She held out her hand for the phone. "May I?" Jason looked at me. I nodded once. He handed her the phone. Victor Hale was brought out of the building at 8:14 in the morning. He walked between 2 officers with his leather bag still over his shoulder, and his expression set in the specific, careful neutrality that had been his default since the first morning I met him in my own living room. He did not look at the small group of former members still standing on the sidewalk. He did not look at Jason. He looked at me. For 3 seconds across the width of Colorado Boulevard, Victor Hale looked directly at me with those pale gray eyes, and his expression did not change. Not anger, not fear, not anything I could name, except the particular blankness of a man who has just lost a calculation he had been certain of winning. Then an officer opened the rear door of the second cruiser, and Victor Hale got in, and the door closed, and the vehicle pulled away from the curb and turned the corner and was gone. Jason stood beside me on the sidewalk, watching the cruiser disappear. His hands were in his pockets. His jaw was tight. His eyes were dry and clear. "Dad," he said quietly, "what happens now?" I looked at my son standing in the morning light on a sidewalk in old Pasadena, 38 years old, beginning the longest and most difficult walk of his life, the one that leads back to yourself after you've been somewhere you shouldn't have gone. Now, I said, we go home. 3 months later, I sat on the front porch of the house on Rosevilla Street with 2 cups of coffee and watched the December light come over the San Gabriel Mountains. It was the particular light of Southern California, in winter low and clean and pale gold, the kind that made everything look like it had been rinsed overnight and set out to dry. The rose bushes in Eleanor's garden were bare now, the way they always went bare in December, but the soil around them was dark and turned and cared for, in a way it hadn't been in 2 years, because Jason had been working in that garden every Saturday morning since October, kneeling in the dirt with his sleeves rolled up and his hands moving through the earth with the careful, deliberate attention of someone who needed something to tend. I heard the back door open at 7:12, his footsteps on the porch boards familiar, unhurried. He came around the corner of the house with soil on his knees and sat down in the chair beside me and picked up the second cup of coffee without being asked. We sat for a while and let the morning happen around us. The legal results I could summarize quickly because they were not the point of any of this, even though they mattered. Victor Hale had been formally charged in October wire fraud under federal statute financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult under California Welfare and Institutions Code coercive control under AB 3074 and practicing psychology without a valid license under the Business and Professions Code. The case was building toward trial. Margaret Holloway had given her statement to both the California AG and the federal investigators without wavering once. The district attorney in Maricopa County had reopened the 2018 investigation based on the new evidence. New Dawn Financial Partners LLC had been dissolved by court order. The $23,000 was in the process of being recovered through criminal restitution, which meant it would take time and was not guaranteed and was still the right thing to pursue. Victor's attorney had entered a not guilty plea. That was expected. Trials took time. Justice, when it came slowly and incompletely, and through a process that was neither satisfying nor cinematic. I had testified in enough courtrooms to know that. Harold had provided a written statement that the lead investigator described as the most meticulous civilian documentation she had received in 20 years of financial crimes work. He had called me the afternoon after submitting it, sounding exactly like himself, and said, "I told you I wanted to be certain before I put it in your hands." I told him he had been. He said, "Good." And we talked for 40 minutes about whether the Pasadena Unified School District was going to renovate the old gymnasium on the east side or tear it down, which was the kind of conversation that had nothing to do with anything that had happened, and everything to do with the fact that we were still here, and the street was still quiet, and the ordinary business of the neighborhood was continuing in the way it always did, regardless of what happened inside the houses along it. Diane called every Sunday. Lily was in a recovery program that Samuel had helped identify, a structured, properly licensed therapeutic program run by a team of actual psychologists in Glendale, 12 miles from Pasadena. Lily had called her mother for the first time in 15 months on a Tuesday evening in November, and Diane had told me about it the following Sunday, with a voice so full of something she couldn't contain that she had to stop twice and breathe before she could continue. Lily had simply said, "Mom, I'm sorry, I'm coming back." Diane had said, "I know, I'll be here." That was all. That was everything. Jason went to Samuel's clinic twice a week. He didn't talk about what happened in those sessions, which was exactly right. He talked about other things, about a design project he was beginning to work on, again tentatively, the way you put weight on a leg you're not sure has healed enough. About a friend from before. He joined the group who had called out of the blue in October and asked if he wanted to grab coffee, and Jason had said yes. About the garden, always about the garden, the specific satisfaction of working in it, of watching things that had been cut back and left alone begin again slowly and without drama. I did not push. I had learned in 35 years of walking into burning structures that the most dangerous thing you could do in the aftermath of a fire was move through the wreckage too quickly. Things that looked stable weren't always stable. Recovery required patience and attention, and the willingness to go slowly when everything in you wanted to run. He was here. He was working. He was mine. That was enough. On the porch that December morning, Jason wrapped both hands around his coffee mug and looked out at the street at the liquid amber trees with their bare winter branches at Harold's house across the way, with its upstairs light already on at the pale sky over the mountains, going slowly from gray to gold. "Dad," he said. "Yeah, I've been thinking about something." He turned the mug slowly in his hands. "When you came home early, when you turned around on the highway and drove back." He paused. "What made you do it? You didn't know anything yet. You just turned around." I looked at my son sitting beside me in the winter light, his hands around his coffee cup, his knees still dark with soil from his mother's garden. "In 35 years, I said, I walked into a lot of buildings that were on fire, and there were always two kinds of smoke. The kind you could see from the outside, the big obvious plume that told you exactly where the problem was, and the kind you couldn't see from the outside. The kind that was already moving through the walls and the floors and the ceiling before any flame had broken through. I looked at the mountains. You learn to feel that second kind. You can't explain it exactly. You just know the building is telling you something and you'd better listen." Jason was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "And you felt that? About the house?" "About you," I said. He looked at me. His eyes were clear and steady and completely his own. The eyes I had known since the morning the nurses put him in my arms in the delivery room at Huntington Hospital. And I had looked down at his face and understood for the first time in my life what it meant to have something worth protecting. His chin moved once, that small, controlled movement of a man holding something in, and then he turned back to the street and lifted his coffee cup and drank. We sat on the porch together in the December light and let the morning continue around us. The mockingbird started up in the liquid amber tree at the edge of the yard, running through its repertoire. In the early quiet, the rapid varied phrases that it repeated and changed and repeated again, filling the winter air with something that sounded, if you were willing to hear it that way, almost like a conversation between the bird and the morning, and everything that had survived to be part of both. Eleanor's roses were bare, but the roots were deep and the soil was being tended, and spring in Pasadena came, whether you were ready for it or not. I have spent 35 years learning that fire is not the most dangerous thing in a burning building. The most dangerous thing is the assumption that you know where the fire is, that you can see all of it, that what is visible is all there is. The fire I could not see was the one that nearly took my son, not with heat and smoke and the dramatic visible urgency of something obviously wrong, but quietly, deliberately, one small decision at a time, in the rooms of a house I thought I knew. I did not save my son the way I saved strangers from burning buildings, by running in, by carrying him out, by being faster and stronger than the thing that threatened him. I saved him the way you save something that matters, slowly, carefully, by refusing to stop, by keeping the door open long after the reasonable hour for keeping doors open had passed. He came back through it on his own. That is the only way it ever works. The light on the mountains went fully gold. The street woke up around us, a car backing out of a driveway 3 houses down, the sound of a dog starting up somewhere on the next block, Harold's front door opening and closing as he went out for his morning walk, the way he had done every day for as long as I had lived across the street from him. Some things hold on even when you stop tending them. Some things come back. I picked up my coffee cup and drank, and my son sat beside me, and the morning continued, and it was enough. It was more than enough. This is a family story I never expected to live. A man I trusted with my son's grief used that grief like a key, quietly, patiently, one small decision at a time, until the door had been open so long, Jason forgot it wasn't his choice to leave it that way. And if I could go back, I would have knocked on Jason's door sooner. I would have sat with his grief instead of managing it from a distance. I would have remembered that silence between a father and son is not peace. It is just silence waiting to be filled by someone else. My personal belief family betrayal rarely looks like betrayal at first. It looks like drifting, like a door left quietly open. I believe God put Harold across that street for a reason, and I believe that love, when it refuses to give up, always finds its way back through the wreckage. If this family story touched something in you, if you have ever watched someone you love walk towards something that frightened you and not known how to call them back, leave a comment below. Tell me your story. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't yet subscribed to this channel, because the next story is already waiting for you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. The following stories contain fictional elements created for educational and reflective purposes. If this type of content is not for you, feel free to explore other content that better suits your needs, and I'll see you wherever our paths cross next.